Hello, everybody. Thanks again for joining me this evening. This evening, we're going to be looking at the concept of self-awareness. Now, this evening, I'm going to be looking at what self-awareness is, what it means. I'm also going to be looking at the benefits of being a bit more self-aware, how we can utilize it to our advantage in a lot of our situations. And we're also, as always, going to be looking at some ideas to help you with your self-awareness, to help build self-awareness. So, first of all, when it comes to self-awareness, now at its most basic level, I guess self-awareness is what I think and what I feel. But there is much more to it than that. It's kind of a multifaceted, multi-leveled kind of thing, multi-layered rather. It is also a lifelong journey. It's something we continually learn. Now, ideally in therapy, we learn to become a bit more self-aware. We can explore things with our therapist, what things mean, where they come from, how these things influence us in the here and now. Anyone that was listening last time when I was talking about our shadow self, for instance, we can learn to understand those parts of us that we maybe don't fully understand, why they're there, where they come from, what they mean to us, and integrate some of those things. We can also learn our strengths. We can learn our values. And even what makes them our values, why we hold on to them, or if you will, at our very core, our moral compass. And as I say, it's something that I think we continually learn. Now, to paraphrase one of my heroes, Carl Jung, paraphrasing him completely out of context, by the way, because he meant something else when he said this. But just when we think we've got ourselves figured out, we don't, because there is always more to learn. Okay, so self-awareness is really it's an ongoing journey. It's something we all do. And so I often say to my clients, people that come to see me, why do you think your therapist goes to see a therapist? So self-awareness, if you will, it's our ability to be introspective. Okay, we recognize, we understand, we have a conscious knowledge. Things that are in our unconscious, if you will, they come into our consciousness. So we don't really do things automatically anymore. We have a better understanding of why we do things, and that way we can make more informed decisions. We can also open ourselves up to challenge some of those deeply ingrained beliefs that we might have, some of the things that might be holding us back. We can also understand better some of the values and the beliefs we do have, the ones that serve us quite well, why they're important to us. We also recognize our own behaviors. And self-awareness as well, it's not just about what's going on with me, being a bit more aware of me. Self-awareness is also being able to, if you will, recognize the impact we have on other people, how we come across. If you think of a perfect example, I think a really good example of a lack of self-awareness would be if anybody's ever watched the American version of The Office, Michael Scott, the manager. There's a perfect example of a lack of self-awareness, thinking he's very funny, thinking he's very popular, but not understanding the very things he's doing kind of irritates people. So it's recognizing not just what's going on with me, but the impact that I have with others. As we begin to learn a bit more about ourselves, develop our self-awareness, as I've said in previous live streams I've done, we can learn to recognize our triggers. We recognize why they're triggers, what they bring up on us, where they came from. And that can help inform us, because we might be in a situation with someone who's maybe they're pushing the same buttons, or they're doing or saying things that bring certain things up in us. And rather than reacting the way we would normally do, we can learn to respond. We know what we're thinking, we know what we're feeling, and those things can inform us rather than make the decision for us. So when we're learning a bit more about ourselves, as I said a moment ago, we learn about our strengths. We also learn about our weaknesses, areas that we would like to develop, areas that we would like to be better at. We can also look at perhaps what we're doing in one area quite confidently that we could use that can compensate for an area that we struggle in. We recognize the things that align with our natural abilities. Sometimes we might be very creative, we might be very resourceful. So we can utilize those skills in areas where we could maybe enhance our position, enhance ourselves a little more. We can choose areas, an area that we might have a passion for. It might be, say, creative writing, it might be art, it might be something mechanical, it might be something engineering wise. When we recognize our skills and talents, we can utilize them in those areas to get the best from ourselves, if you will. When we recognize our weaknesses as well, when we learn to compensate for them by using some of our other skills, what we stop doing is we stop avoiding them. We stop, if you will. So, as I often say, whenever we feel or experience something really unpleasant or uncomfortable, I think a lot of us are the first port of call is, what do I do to avoid this? What will take this uncomfortable feeling away? When we're a bit more of how resourceful we can be, when we're aware of our options, our support network, our choices, our resources, things like that, it's not always a question of what gets me out of it. It could be a question of what gets me through it. So we can become a bit more confident. We can become a bit more courageous as well. And again, going back to what we were talking about last time, the shadow part of ourselves, the parts of us that are unacceptable, when we learn why they're unacceptable, who were they unacceptable to? Because they might very well be unacceptable. I think we're all capable of being the villain once in a while. But there are other times when we fear being the villain. So other people will take advantage of that. We fear that maybe saying no is a bad word. We're going to be painted in a bad light. The more aware of that we become, I think, well, it's that old expression, knowledge is power. We can handle those situations a bit better. Sometimes we recognize we're always going to be somebody's villain. Doesn't matter what it is. I will say to every billionaire megalomaniac that's trying to take over the world, James Bond is the villain. So we're always going to be someone's villain. We can also look at the skills that we have, that we already have, and the experience we already have. We can look at those things and we can build on those in other areas. If we want to learn new skills, we want to learn perhaps to be more assertive, we want to learn a particular skill, for a different kind of job. What characteristics do I have? What traits do I have? What skills do I have that can help me with that? What can I rely on? Some people are very good at learning things by just reading about them. Some people are very good at learning about things by hearing about it. Some people are very good by watching, seeing it done. Other people are very good by practicing it, by doing it. So whenever we're aware of even things like our learning styles, we can use those. We can focus on those. We can also, as I said, use them to compensate for other areas that we struggle with. When it comes to our awareness as well, talking to other people, how we impact other people, we can recognize that when we're being assertive, for instance, we're not necessarily being aggressive. We can learn that no isn't a bad word. We can learn that we can be flexible. Sometimes we can change our mind. It's perfectly okay to change our mind. We seem to live in a world these days where something you said when you were 12 years of age has to be true today. No, that's not necessarily true. We can give ourselves permission to change our mind. We can also give others permission to change their mind. We might say something like, well, you asked me for that and I said no, but I've given it some thought. I actually have the time. I have the resources, so maybe I could help you out. We could do it the other way as well. I've been given that some thought. What you're asking is maybe unfair. I don't have the time or whatever it is. So I'm going to have to say no this time. We can give ourselves that kind of permission. And that's what I mean by awareness being able to help us with our confidence and our esteem and so on. It also helps us to adapt our approaches to different things. Because sometimes if we're doing things automatically, again, we're doing them from our unconscious, like our defense mechanisms, they're out there at the speed of light. We can adapt. We can look at different obstacles. We can look at different challenges, and we can think a bit more strategically, because sometimes the answer might not be right now, but it could be, how do I get there? It could be like a small step at a time. It could be, if you will, planning small, smart goals in order to get what we need. We can learn to, if you will, we can delay our gratification. It's not always about instant gratification. Question I asked recently in one of the videos that a couple of people picked up on, it's asking ourselves things like, what can I do now? What can I put in place now, today? What can I start first thing in the morning? that I might thank myself for at a later date. So, some of the reasons why I think self-awareness is important, how it can be useful. I'm going to have a look at some of the advantages and how we can utilize our self-awareness whenever we become a bit more. Well, first of all, we can identify areas for improvement. We can make conscious choices that are aligned with our values, with our moral compass, with our particular goals. So we can recognize that, for instance, if we decided we wanted to become a bit more fit, okay, we want to, you know, run a marathon or something, or we want to build a bit of muscle, lose a bit of weight, whatever it is, we can make a choice. Well, that might involve a bit of exercise. So what kind of exercise? Well, what am I physically capable of? It could be starting by just going for walks. It could be jogging. It could be going to the gym or whatever. But we also recognize that there are some foods we're going to have to let go of, whether we like them or not, if we want to lose a bit of weight, build them a bit of muscle. So we might recognize that the pizza is okay as a treat, maybe once a week, maybe once every other week, but maybe not all night, every day of the week. So we can, if you will, we get a bit more self-discipline. Okay, we're thinking in terms of our longer goal instead of the instant gratification. The self-reflection, it can foster like that personal growth, and with the self-confidence, and the more we practice it, the easier it is to say things like, well, I happen to like pizza, but it's not in my best interest, and maybe have it at the end of the month, or I'll have it after the race, or I'll have it when whatever. And on that, it can help us make better decisions. We can feel a bit more motivated. We recognize not just our motivations for wanting to do a certain thing, but we can also recognize some of the obstacles, some of the bad habits that we've fallen into, things like procrastination. It's a very easy habit to fall into, but we don't often understand why. We can also look at, as I said, the longer term goals, like we're trying to get rid of the short term pain. So sometimes we have to go through the short-term pain in order to get the long-term goals. So we shift our focus. The self-awareness, we are aware that maybe we don't want to sacrifice the time. We don't want to sacrifice whatever it is, but it is in our best interest. So we can start, as I said, by making better decisions. We make decisions, again, maybe based on the information we have, what we think, what we feel, what we believe. There's a lot of different things, but it's an informed decision that we're making, not just one that we think feels good or looks good, particularly to other people. Can also help us when it comes to our decision making, stop us maybe being so impulsive. Sometimes we do pick things in the spur of the moment, and there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. It's okay being spontaneous once in a while, but if we continually do that, if we're acting impulsively, for instance, we keep saying yes, we mean to say no, but it's out there at the speed of light. It can give us the ability to give ourselves a bit of space and to think about things. We can think about the consequences of doing something. We can also think about the consequences of not doing it. We can weigh those consequences up, if you will. We can make a better decision. Someone's just mentioned warp speed 9.9. What, in this old bucket? She'll fly apart at the seams. She wasn't designed for this kind of thing. See, I'm even giving my age away when I'm talking about the original track series. See how easily I'm distracted. What was I talking about? Yeah, making our decisions, giving ourselves a bit of space to think, weighing up, if you will, the pros and cons, the benefits as well as the sacrifice, the consequences of doing as well as the consequences of not doing. And then we choose our consequences. Consequences, by the way, don't have to be bad. Sometimes they are. They can be painful, but they may be in our longer term best interest. There are also what's known as positive consequences. Sometimes the benefits, there may have been benefits we hadn't considered. So as I say, we're making maybe healthier decisions, giving ourselves that space to think. Way of looking at awareness when it comes to decisions. I often think of we think in terms of positive and negative, as I said a moment ago about the consequences. I often think of being a bit more balanced. I think being balanced is maybe the best way we approach a lot of things. There is negative in something. There's pain. There's whatever. There is the downside. There's the bad side, whatever term you want to call it. There is that. But there are also things like opportunities. There are things like resources. There are things like there may be obstacles, but there might not be obstacles. We'll see them as obstacles. What they might be are steps that we have to take. So when we take the middle path, we're able to see both the positive and the negative, and we can make a more informed decision. If we only ever look at one, if we only ever look at the negative, we are ignoring things like growth. As I say, we're ignoring opportunities, we're ignoring resources, support networks, things that can help us. But if we only ever look at the positive, maybe sometimes we're in denial. So it's about having a look at both, okay? Making a more informed decision because we're weighing up things on either side. We're not necessarily going to be doing things that we believe are maybe the most expedient. So I think I talked about one time before the difference between a good thing and the right thing. We'll learn to recognize the difference the more aware we become. Not just of what's going on with us, but what is going on with other people. Because sometimes trying to help someone, I think I talked about this when I was talking about the drama triangle. There's a difference between helping someone and trying to rescue them, trying to fix them. There's a difference between caring about and caring for. So we can recognize the difference between a good thing and the right thing. So we're able to, if you will, evaluate things a bit more objectively. We're able to make decisions, not sometimes just in our own best interest, but sometimes in someone else's. We can help them, we can support them, we can guide them. What we're not going to necessarily do is do it for them. Okay. Being a bit more self-aware can also help us regulate our emotions. We know what we're feeling. We'll also have an idea of why we're feeling. We're able to name it. I often say, sometimes we'll say anxious, but we can go that little bit further. I feel uncertain. I feel a lack of control. I feel helpless. I feel as if, or I fear that something is happening or it might happen. And whatever it is, I'm not enough to be able to handle it. It's going to be catastrophic. When we get a sense of what we're feeling, the feeling can inform us, not necessarily make the decision for us. And when I say inform us, like I feel helpless, well, okay. What power do I not think I have? What power is it I think I need? I feel a lack of control. Well, what control do you feel you're lacking? What control do you have? Think of I don't know if anybody watched, but the very, very first live stream I did, I went through 3 questions to help people problem solve. They're good ways of building on your self-awareness. Whatever you're dealing with, can I change it? Is it mine to change in the first place? What would change look like? What would I do with it even if I had it? How would it feel? What would other people see that's different? What can I change? We cannot change other people. We cannot change the past. We can change our approach. We can change our direction. We can change how we handle things. We can change what or how we think. We can change how we behave. There's different things we can do. So change brings up a lot of questions. The second one is acceptance. Whatever you're struggling with, can you accept it? Doesn't mean you're okay with it if you do. It just means you're acknowledging it is what it is. So the question is, where do we go from here? In other words, it takes us back to the question, what can I change? The last one being, can I just leave it alone? Which can be very difficult, one of the most difficult things we'll ever do, but it can also be one of the most liberating. When we do that, doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. We don't care. It just means we're not going to allow it to take up any more of our time. It's not going to consume any more of us. It means we're going to maybe focus that energy somewhere else. So there's 3 questions. They're solution finding questions, but they are quite good for building on awareness as well. So remember them. Can I change it? Can I accept it? Can I just leave it alone? So there's my mind wandering again, way off track here. I'm talking about emotional regulation. Yeah, we know what we're feeling. We also know why. We're aware of maybe where those feelings come from, what they remind us of. Someone raising their voice, we might feel as if we're a 10-year-old in front of the teacher again. When we're a bit more aware, we're updating our memory. We're not a 10-year-old anymore. We're an adult. This person is not the teacher. This person, I don't know, maybe they're a manager or something. So they do have responsibility. They do have a level of authority. But they're still, you're still equals. You can still talk as equals. they can't make you go out and wash their car at lunchtime. You know, you do still, they're bound by the same employment laws and terms and conditions that you and I are. So we can handle our situations differently when we're able to regulate how we feel. It's not that we don't feel it, but when we're aware of it, when we're able to regulate it, we can pay attention to it. We can allow it to inform us. And a lot of the time, the intensity of the feeling starts to dilute. Okay, it doesn't necessarily go away, but it dilutes. And again, like I say, we start to become a bit more confident. If we're angry, we understand why we're angry. What does the anger mean? A lot of the time when we're angry, it's because we see something as really, really unfair. So we're being honest with ourselves as what makes this unfair, because whatever it is could be very unfair. We do all the work and someone else takes the credit. That is very unfair. Sometimes we're a bit more aware that, well, you know what, it just didn't go my way. Okay, now, not necessarily anything we can do about that, but what we can do is we can take that experience and channel it somewhere else. It's what we learn from it. When we recognize our emotions and we're able to understand them more effectively, we can also recognize the triggers, the buttons that some people might push. We recognize patterns in our behavior. For instance, someone raises their voice and we back down. We'll become a bit more aware of that. We'll be a bit more aware of our emotional responses to things as well. And awareness will always give us a choice. We can continue doing the same thing. Sometimes it might be the best course of action, depending on the situation, but it gives us a choice that we can choose something. Again, we might feel a bit nervous whenever someone raises their voice, but if we change our course of action, we change how we behave, we can still remain calm. We can still be collected. We can be assertive. We're not going to lose our temper, but we're not necessarily going to back down either. Okay. So we recognize some of those triggers, those things that might bring up fear in us, that might bring up anxiety in us, that might bring up stress in us. And it's not that they shouldn't, but whenever we're aware of that, again, by updating our memory, by being aware of it, we can choose a different course of action if it's the most appropriate thing to do. And when we do that as well, it can help reduce stress, because sometimes we recognize having a conversation with someone might be a very difficult conversation, and it's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to hurt their feelings. We don't want to hassle them. We don't want them to think badly of us. We don't want to cause any kind of contention, but we recognize the conversation needs to happen. So it can make us a bit more courageous, a bit more confident. We recognize what would happen if we don't have the conversation. This situation could get worse. It's certainly not going to get any better. We recognize what that fear, what that nervousness in us is at having the difficult conversation. When we're aware of that, again, that gives us choices. Okay, because even if it is a very difficult conversation, like I said a moment ago, the question is not how do I avoid it. The question could be what helps me get through it. The way to illustrate that would be if you were to put yourself on a scale. Let's imagine it is a difficult conversation, and the thought of having it makes you a 9 out of 10. Okay, 0, you're grand, not caring the world. You're just eating a big bowl of lavender. You're so relaxed. 10, you are at your wit's end. So the thought of having that conversation, you're at a 9. We would be thinking, generally, human beings, we tend to be thinking of what gets me out of it, that gets it back to a 0. And we would think that would mean avoiding the conversation. With the awareness, we could be thinking a little differently, a bit more strategically. We could be thinking, what would make it an 8? Just 1 point. What reduces it by 1 point? What makes it just 1 point easier? Because the curious thing is, and I think this is like a psychological kind of mind hack, sometimes the thing that reduces it by 1 point can actually reduce it by about maybe 4 or 5. Okay, a lot of the time it's the feeling we fear, not necessarily the thing itself. So we can, as I say, make healthier decisions when we're able, and behave differently as well whenever we're able to regulate how we feel. We recognize when we're getting agitated, because a lot of people watch my channel, you've been in relationships, or maybe you are in relationships with people that just love to push your buttons. They manipulate you, they control you, they treat you like you're nothing. And many times they focus on the reaction. They focus on our reaction, our upset, our anger, and things like that, as if that's the problem, instead of what they're actually doing. With awareness, we can learn to respond rather than react. Now, chances are they're probably still going to find some kind of fault with it, but we can still we can be assertive. We can remain calm. We can we're focusing on the outcome, focusing on the resolution rather than what's been happening. So I often say, especially when we're being provoked, whenever we react, the other person has control. Whenever we respond, we have control. I think that's a huge difference. Okay. Being a bit more aware can actually improve our relationships. Our relationships with lots of people. Our communication style. We recognize our communication style. We learn to adapt our communication style in different situations with different people. We can also be more open. We can be a bit more honest. Now, we don't have to be overly honest. Remember what I said earlier on about the impact we have on people. We generally don't sit next to strangers on the bus telling them about our terrible ingrown toenail and all the rest of it. We generally don't do that. We're a bit more aware that way. So we know what's worth sharing and what isn't. We're able to adapt maybe our approach. We're able to adapt how we communicate. We're also maybe a bit more aware of the other person in the sense that we're listening actively to them. We're paying attention to their tone of voice, their body language, the words they're using. We can listen for nuance. We can listen for, again, whatever it is they're saying. It might be situational. I think when we're not actively listening, what often happens, and this is one of the reasons why, if you're in a conversation with like a very narcissistic person, one of the reasons why we never seem to get through to them is whenever someone's talking, they're already thinking of an answer. They're already thinking of a comeback. They're already thinking of a way out of it. They're already thinking of something. So they're not actually hearing anything. The more self-aware we become, we actually listen. We wait until they're finished and then we think of an answer. Then we think of the response. Conversations tend to flow a bit easier when we do that. Whenever we show someone that we are actively listening, sometimes that encourages them to listen to us. Now, that being said, if you're in if it's a conversation with quite a toxic person, probably not going to happen. But what is going to happen is they might start to recognize that no matter what it is they're doing, they're not getting through. They're not getting the responses that sometimes they look for. So we can communicate a bit more effectively. We can adapt our approaches, not just in our communication and our relationships, but even just our approaches to just general tasks. We can adapt how we approach things. We can recognize obstacles and we can navigate around them and so on. We can express thoughts, feelings a bit more clearly. We can, if we don't understand someone, we can ask them, to help us to understand. Another way of showing that we're actively listening. Whenever we're doing that, it helps to reduce conflicts. Carl Rogers, again, another psychologist guy I would have followed. He's be one of my heroes. He would often express things about the importance of listening. People start to heal whenever they feel they're being heard, whenever they're feeling understood, whenever they're being listened to. And that's where our empathy comes in. And speaking of empathy, our self-awareness helps us to empathize with others. A lot of us, we already have empathy. Our empathy, sometimes our empathy is one of those things that, again, if it's unregulated, we can recognize someone is in distress and we care about them and we want to do something and, we want to help them out. When we have empathy as well, we can recognize things from different perspectives. Like when people are arguing, with a bit of empathy, you can understand their perspective. You understand why something might be important to them. And empathy can lead to more meaningful kind of relationships. Doesn't matter who it's with. It could be in work, it could be with family, it could be with partners. It can lead to more meaningful relationships. But the thing about empathy, if there's no boundaries, it can be self-destructive. And what I mean by that is, again, we see someone who's maybe hurt and we think we have to do everything we can to help them, to fix them. And sometimes that's not a bad thing, because maybe there are things they can't do for themselves. But then there's other times, there's just people who will exploit our empathy. No's a bad word, so we start to fear saying no. When you think of things like covert narcissism, they often play on people's empathy because, oh, God love them, they're victims at everything. So we try to fix them, we try to help them, and we feel bad for feeling good. With self-awareness, we recognize we can have empathy, but we can have it with boundaries. As I said a moment ago, the difference between caring about and caring for, the difference between supporting someone in some way and trying to fix them, trying to help them, trying to rescue them. We can be compassionate, we can be patient, we can be all of those things. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to drop everything for everybody else. We learn to pay attention to ourselves as well as other people. Okay. So there are some of the reasons why self-awareness can be useful, how we can utilize it, how we can benefit from it. So some ideas to help you with your self-awareness, some little things to try. So I always say, by the way, and I think I said at the beginning of the live stream, it is a lot easier if you're doing this with a therapist. However, some ideas you might want to do on your own is just to practice a little bit of self-reflection, a little bit of introspection. Now, if you have a bit of time to yourself, just set it aside. You might maybe do some journaling, keep a mood diary. Some people find meditation helpful. Maybe just a wee bit of quiet contemplation. Really, what you're doing with the introspection is you're not necessarily overthinking things, but what you're doing is you're thinking of your experiences, the situations you've been in, and what came up for you. Now, it doesn't all have to be bad. Sometimes could be quite good, could be quite pleasant. But you're thinking about what they came up for you. What was good about it? Did you feel valued? Did you feel respected? Did you feel heard? Did you feel listened to? Or what was maybe bad about it? Did you feel disempowered? Did you feel disrespected? Did you feel as if you weren't being taken seriously? When we take that little bit of time to self-reflect on experiences, could be at any point in our life, even just earlier that day, we explore our thoughts and our feelings around those experiences, what they actually mean to us, again, where they might have come from in the first place. You can even be asking yourself questions about your beliefs. We all have beliefs. Everybody believes in something. We believe in God. We believe in law and order. We believe in science. We believe, I don't know, we believe the bus is going to get us there in time. We all have different beliefs. The thing about our beliefs is when we pay attention to them, if our beliefs can't really stand up to scrutiny, sometimes we believe things and we don't know why that we believe them. But if our beliefs can't be held up to scrutiny, sometimes we need to ask ourselves as to why we're holding on to them. What purpose do they serve? Now, I'm not talking about a belief. Like for instance, people have a faith, a religion of some kind, so they have a belief. If you were to question their beliefs, they can probably give a good reason for their faith, okay? But then you'll meet other people who might have a belief in something, that this kind of person is like this, or that person there is definitely that, and, they might never even have met. But if you were to ask them about their beliefs, there would be nothing to maybe back those beliefs up. It would just be, if you will, it's something they've decided in their head. So whenever we explore our own beliefs, we get an idea of what it is we believe, why it is we believe it. It could serve some purpose. And in some situations, it maybe still does. There are other times when maybe we need to be a bit more adaptable. Maybe we need to learn something new. Sometimes our beliefs, if you will, our beliefs come from things that were maybe true once in a certain situation, not necessarily true in this situation. They may have been things that we were led to believe at some point. Or it could be a belief that, if you will, goes with our moral compass. We believe it's wrong to hurt people. We believe it's wrong to steal. We understand why it's wrong to steal, it's wrong to hurt people. We're just being a bit more honest with ourselves. So we don't necessarily have to change anything, but we're just a bit more aware of why we believe something. The beliefs are able to be held up to scrutiny. Even our values as well, and our goals. What is our goals, or what are our goals? We may have a particular goal. Why is it important? Is it our goal? Is it something that we would really like to do, something we would like to be like, something we would like to achieve? Or is it something that we think is going to please others? Even if that's the case, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but again, we're just being honest with ourselves. And our behaviors as well. Again, things like avoidance behaviors, or sometimes we might be antagonistic, or sometimes we might be overly playful, we might be flippant about things. When we understand why, again, reflecting on things, a little bit of introspection. It's not that we're doing anything good or anything bad, we're just being a bit more honest with ourselves. There may be some things we might need to change, in which case, how do we go about it? There's a question about the self-reflection that's just come into my head. Sometimes when we take that little moment, we're doing a little bit of introspection. If we were to ask ourselves, if there's one thing that we could change, one thing about us, okay, one thing about me that I could change. When we ask ourselves, there's probably a lot of different things, but if we were to just pick one thing, something I would like to change, then we pay attention to, why would I like to change it? Why would that be important? Now, if I want to change it, maybe it's holding me back somehow, maybe it has hurt me somehow, or maybe it could be hurting other people. Whatever it is, but we pay attention to what it is. We try to understand it. Why would it need to change? Now, we might not get an answer that we would like whenever we start being a bit introspective, whenever we start thinking about things on a deeper level. We might not necessarily get answers we like, but we might get answers we need. We might be able to identify the certain problems, whatever the problem is, whatever the issue is. And then we can think about, well, what's the best course of action? How do I go about this? And also what I said earlier on about the self-awareness, how important it is that gives us a choice. There's something about us we would like to change. The next time we're in that situation, and maybe that's coming up, again, we have the choice. We can do the same thing again, but we understand that it's a problem. It might be hurting us or other people. Or we can try something different. Okay, so don't know if you find that question helpful or not, but just that one thing about me I'd like to change. Maybe if you want to phrase it another way, something I would like to improve. Okay. Pardon me. Having people that you trust. I often say, especially coming out of difficult, toxic relationships, having people that you can trust is important. People that will bring out the best in you, healthy, supportive relationships. So asking for honest feedback from them. So even if you're getting criticism, it may be constructive. And pay attention and listen. I always say you should listen to people because you might learn things you don't know. Getting that honest feedback from someone, not even just a constructive criticism, it might even be a bit of praise, something we've handled well. Maybe we have come further on our journey than we thought. Maybe we think we're still struggling, but someone is able to point out how far we've come over the past week, month, year, whatever it was. So it's useful to have, if you will, honest people that you trust around you, looking at from a little bit of feedback from them, being open to hearing different perspectives as well. I said about active listening, being open to different perspectives. It can give you insights that you didn't have. We all have blind spots as well, by the way, things that we don't necessarily see in ourselves, but other people might see. Being open to those perspectives, once that whatever was in our blind spot, once we're aware of that, again, gives us a choice. We're now aware of it. We might be aware of how we come across where we weren't before. So there's something we can change there if we want to. A lot of people find mindfulness helpful. Mindfulness exercises. There's a lot of YouTube videos, podcasts, there's exercises, things like that. There's people practice it. They do it in groups. Some therapists do it. Probably not a popular thing to say for a therapist to say, but Do you know what I would have called mindfulness before they called it mindfulness? I would have called it paying attention. Okay. We're just paying attention. We're paying attention to what we think, what we feel, what we experience in the moment. We have five senses, sight, sound, touch, smell, all that sort of thing. We use our senses in the moment and we pay attention to what we notice it. We do it, if you will, and with mindfulness, you're doing it without judging it. You're paying attention to it. When we practice skills like that, whenever we're in a situation, maybe we're feeling agitated, we might be feeling stressed. Um, the skills we've learned when we're practicing the mindfulness, we're aware of what's going on with us. We're aware of our physical reactions. We might feel knots in our stomach. We might feel a tension headache. We might get a lot of energy. We can't sit down, or we can't sit still, rather. We might notice our breathing has changed. But we might also notice things like what's coming up for us emotionally. I'm feeling helpless. I'm feeling threatened, whatever it is. The mindfulness can be really, really good for recognizing some of those things, recognizing some of our reactions, some of the patterns that we go through. And these allow us to make conscious choices, if you will, rather than being driven just by our automatic habits or our unconscious habits. So mindfulness, if anybody has any thoughts on it, if anybody has practiced it, if anybody's found it useful, so I always say, leave a comment in the box, the wee comment box, because other people reading it might benefit from it. They might not have, they might not have tried it, so they might not know about it. I'll say people benefit from your wisdom and your experience. If you feel comfortable enough to share things, please go ahead and do so. So mindfulness, it can be helpful, as I say, in being a bit more present, a bit more here and now. Okay. When we think of our core values and the things that shape our decisions and our actions as well, again, it will give us a choice. Sometimes our beliefs are found, they're based on maybe a faith, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Other times, again, it's things we're perhaps being led to believe, or things that are no longer true, if indeed they ever were. But we understand what we believe, why we believe it, and what to do about it, if anything at all. It doesn't do any harm as well to practice self-awareness, to be open to new experiences. Now, I'm always going to be careful how I say this, because I'm not suggesting you do anything rash or crazy or anything. Meeting new kinds of people, listening to different kinds of perspectives. Sometimes I often say, when people come out of a long-term toxic situation, whether that was a relationship, an environment, whatever it was, if they pay attention, they will notice that there are little things start to change, unconscious things. For instance, maybe their taste in music begins to change. They start listening to a different kind of music. Maybe their taste in food changes. They might try food that they've never tried before. They might change their hairstyle. They might change how they dress. Little small subtle changes. Whenever we pay attention, what we're doing is we're actually getting to know ourselves a bit better. The parts of us that kind of got suppressed, kind of got buried, because maybe that person or those people didn't approve of them, didn't approve of those things. They didn't like that music. They didn't like whatever it was. We had to do whatever it was. They said, when we come out of situations like that, we start to notice. If we pay attention, we will notice little subtle changes. That's us getting to know ourselves. It doesn't do any harm to put ourselves into situations, and I'm careful how I say this, because please don't anyone take up anything crazy, where we do get to meet new kinds of people, where we do get to try new kinds of things. We're broadening our experience, so we're therefore broadening our understanding, not just of ourselves, but of other people as well, other situations. These things can help increase our self-awareness. We start to learn, if somebody told us we weren't allowed to do a certain thing, and if we were to try that, it could have been anything. It could have been just having one beer. It could have been listening to a certain type of music. We will try it, and we can decide for ourselves whether or not we like it, whether or not it was a good idea. We can make our own decision. We don't necessarily have to be informed by that person just because they didn't like it or they disapproved of it. And the last thing is practice self-compassion. With our self-awareness, when we're aware that a lot of the time what we do is we punish ourselves, we berate ourselves. Why did I not do this? Why did I not? Why is it always like this for me? Why does nothing ever change? Why did I say yes instead of no? When we practice a little bit of self-compassion, and the way I would put compassion is this: you treat yourself as if you're someone that you care about. It's as simple as that. Someone that you care about, your best friend, family member, whoever it is. If they were to come to you and to tell you the things that you've been through, what would you say to them? Go lock yourself in a darkened room, you'll be fine. No, you wouldn't. You'd give them time. You'd give them patience. You'd be compassionate. You'd be quite creative at trying to find ways to help them. You would give them space. You would have empathy for them. Self-compassion is, like I say, you're treating yourself as if you're someone that you care about, someone else, someone that you really care about. You're turning some of that compassion that you would have for other people, you're turning a little of that inwards, even just once in a while. You're cutting yourself a bit of slack. Every single one of us have regrets. Every single one of us have made mistakes. Every single one of us have done things. By God, if we could rewrite history, we would. Unfortunately, we can't. Every single one of us. A little bit of self-compassion is recognizing that we can have regrets, we can feel guilt, we can feel shame, we can feel all of those things. But again, they can inform us. There's no way we're going to be in that situation again. There's no way someone's going to treat me like that again. We can recognize, again, the importance of, again, I'm thinking in terms of an unhealthy relationship. We can recognize the importance of boundaries and being assertive. We can practice those skills. We can do that with a compassion for ourselves. It can also help us increase our confidence, and we're just being authentic. Of course, we've made mistakes. Very toxic people often point out our mistakes as if they're evidence of us being useless. No, they're not. They're just evidence of us being deeply flawed human beings, just like they are. We're capable of greatness every bit as much as we're capable of muppetry. There's a word I haven't used in a while. We're capable of all of it. And we're just cutting ourselves a little bit of slack. We don't have to pretend to fit in, and we don't have to be unkind to ourselves just because others reject us for things they don't like, rather than what's, the honest, real me. So there are some ideas. That's if you will, that's self-awareness. Some of the reasons why I think it's important, and some of the ways we can utilize it to our advantages, and some ideas to help with it. I suppose the last thing is, which I hadn't made a note of, but one of the things self-awareness can help us with is things like adaptability and resilience. Two things. The ability to adapt. We see a problem, we're not necessarily going to back down. We're not going to think, can't do this, it's just too much. We have a resilience, the ability to keep on, the ability to keep bouncing back, the ability to see the obstacle and be able to navigate our way around it or through it. Because we're aware, as I said earlier on, we're aware of our strengths, we're aware of our limits, we're aware of our capabilities, we're aware of our resources. We're also aware of areas in which we struggle. We're aware of areas we would like to develop. And all of these things can give us a confidence to be able to adapt. It also gives us a resilience to be able to keep on keeping on. So there's just one that pulled out of my head there at the last moment. So as always, I'm going to have a look at the questions now just to see if there's anything that's come up, and I'll answer anything as best I can. Just to make you aware, now, video out at the weekend there about the importance of intimacy. So hopefully tomorrow, if I get it edited and out on time, tomorrow night is looking at the second part, and that's looking at intimacy in a relationship with a very narcissistic person, someone with deeply ingrained narcissistic traits. The reasons why there can be a lack of intimacy, the reasons why they may withhold intimacy, and sometimes the reasons why they will control it in order to manipulate and so on. So as always, I'll give a wee breakdown of things, the hows and whys, but I'll also give a few examples, and I hope you find that helpful. So the last one, which I forgot to mention, The last one is going to be looking at the impact of having been in, if you want to call it, a loveless relationship, the long-term impact that that can have on people. So that'll be out probably next Saturday. So let's have a look at the questions. Hello, everybody. The ones at the beginning are always hellos, hello from here. And you know what fascinates me, that people are TARDIS power. Yeah, TARDIS power. Yeah, absolutely. It fascinates me everywhere, different places in the world that people tune in to watch this. It's wow, it blows me away. I'm a child of the 80s. I grew up in the analog age. We had one telephone in the hall, and it was on a lead. This is amazing. So let's have a look at some of the questions. Sixth Sense, Amelia, need to work on reactions in some situations. A little bit of the self-reflection can help with that. When we pay attention to our reactions, what lies behind them. Sometimes when we react, if you will, it's out there at the speed of light. Now, it's not that we shouldn't react. It's trying to get, if you will, the emotive side of our, the emotional, the emotive part of us, and the rational, cognitive part of us. It's like just trying to get them to work together. It's not that one's good, bad, you know, there's a Jekyll and a Hyde, whatever. They both have their purpose. We need them both. It's just trying to get them to work together. When we're aware of what comes up for us emotionally, when we're aware of what the reaction that's coming up, again, when we respond, we have control. So we can allow that to inform us and then choose the best course of action. Hi, Doctor. Hi, everyone. Do you know what? I knew someone was going to say this, so I have something tonight just to spoil them. I am not a doctor. I am the doctor. Sonic screwdriver. How cool is that? Paying attention. ADHD kryptonite. Paying attention can be difficult. It's not impossible. There are things, there's techniques out there. There's a lot of therapists, highly skilled. Some have ADHD themselves. They have a very good grasp of it. With ADHD as well, there's different ways. I don't say I have ADHD, but I have the kind of mind, as you notice from these live streams, my mind jumps from one thing to the next. I find it very hard to focus on one thing for more than a minute or so. So what I learned to do is I learned to maybe focus on something for a minute, then do something else, and then come back to it. I'm not saying that's an ADHD thing, but I'm just saying there are different ways we can manage the way our brains, the way our minds wander. So I'm not sure if that would help someone with ADHD, but, you know, maybe it would. Be interesting if anyone with ADHD, what they do find helpful. Good explanation of mindfulness. Okay, that's good to know. Let me see. What else do we have? Combined therapy with a trusted person. Yeah, the antidote, if you will, to toxic, difficult, narcissistic people, the antidote is, believe it or not, other people. A lot of the time they erode our trust. We become very guarded. We become very cautious. We find it very hard to trust. When we do trust other people, we are really taking a risk, because yes, they might hurt us again. But what we learn to do is we learn to trust in little pieces. Like anything else, they are small baby steps. We learn that whenever we're trusting other people, we still have our boundaries. We learn what to share and what not to share. Again, the paying attention to myself, but also paying attention to other people. Okay, leaving things alone and letting go is super hard. Dick signs, it is one of the hardest things for anybody, especially when it hurts, especially when it hurts like hell, especially when something may have been very life-changing. It is very hard to let go. It doesn't mean you don't care. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. It doesn't mean any of those things. It doesn't mean you're living in denial. It doesn't mean any of those things. What it means is, what it can mean is sometimes just letting it go just for now. Just for now, because my energy is needed somewhere else. Letting go, leaving it alone, might mean accepting whatever it is ain't going to change. It's in the past. It happened. Nothing's going to change it. And remember, accepting it doesn't mean we're okay with it. It just means it is what it is. It can be one of the most difficult things, but it can also be one of the most liberating. It's again, when we build on our self-awareness, it's why can we not let go of it? Sometimes we can't let go of it because maybe we just haven't fully explored our options yet. We haven't fully explored the implications of it yet. Maybe that's why. So it's not that we should let go of it. It's the question is to bring up, if you will, it's to help problem solve. Is leaving it alone? Is letting go of it an option? And if so, why? And as I say, it's looking at what it doesn't mean as well as what it does mean. Okay. Okay. Gonna take a while if you wrote it. This is a bit of the live stream where people just hear me muttering. Healthy people are the antidote. Yes, absolutely. Being whenever we're broken, yeah, we've all been broken at some point. Healing is not a push of a button. It's not listening to me for an hour every week or so. It is not I don't know, it's not changing how we dress, it's not changing our hairstyle. Healing is a journey. It's a process. It's just like the self-awareness thing. We're building on our self-awareness. It's something we continually do. The pain from things that have happened, the way we've been treated, they don't go away. But over time, we start to look at them maybe in a different context. We recognize where we are in the here and the now. We recognize there is so much more ahead of us. We recognize as we have choices, we have options, we have supports. The other people, as I say, the antidote to it, the other people can help us be a bit more present. We can learn to relax with others. Now, we can still, if you will, we can still have our boundaries, but that does not mean we're being overly cautious. We're not being hyper vigilant. We learn to, if you will, we just be a bit more present. We're aware when something comes up, what it means to us, why it's there, what it reminds us of. And again, whatever decision we make next can be a little more informed. Okay. I have a headache. Terrific live this, Darren. Stuff to think about. Healing, I think, may be for life. Healing can be for life, but that doesn't mean. Let me start that sentence again. Yes, healing can be a lifelong thing. So is building our self-awareness. So are a lot of things. Can be a lifelong process. But if you think of healing being a lifelong process, it's not the same as being hurt forever. It doesn't mean we are hurt forever. The pain can come up from time to time. Sometimes we're going to be reminded. Sometimes things will come up for us. But we can, if you will, talking about the resilience from earlier on, that ability to keep bouncing back, that ability to keep on, keeping on, being able to draw on our resources, our skills, our support network, the things we have learned. Whenever we start to build on those kind of things, whenever the pain does come, whenever the difficulties do come up, they become a bit easier to manage. They don't go away. Think of what I said earlier on about the scale. 0, you're fine. 10, you're at your wit's end. Wherever you are on your scale, the healing is sometimes just what takes it down by 1 point. What takes it down by 1 might actually take it down by 5, maybe 6, whatever. So we start to approach things differently, and the pain we feel in the past again doesn't go away. It's not that we can forget, but it doesn't necessarily have to impact on what we're doing here in the now or in the future. Informs us, nothing else. Doesn't have to hold us back. We don't have to stay stuck in that place. I often say about trauma, one of the things about trauma, when things keep coming up, we keep getting re-triggered, is this belief that yesterday's threat is present today. Yesterday's situation is present today, or I'm right back there. And that's why we often find ourselves reacting the same way. That's not necessarily the case. It might look the same, it might feel the same. But if we look at ourselves today, again, going back to this concept of updating our memories, we're a little bit older, we're a little bit wiser, we're in a different situation, we have a different support network, we have more skill, we have more resilience, we're a bit more confident. There can be a lot of different things going on. So yes, it can be a lifelong process, but that's not the same as being hurt forever. and feeling as if we're stuck there. Bounce back more times than a rubber ball. That's a great expression. Thank you for that, Alison. That really made me laugh. Bounce back more times than a rubber ball. An empath, I continue to do so. I go low, then I go higher each time. It's a very resilient way of looking at it. Yeah, we go lower and then we go higher. And I think that's true in life. It does, it comes, it goes away. Sometimes we do bounce higher than other times. Best gift, stop drinking, work themselves, give respect to your personal space. I think our personal space, as I said earlier on, our personal space is very important. We find the time to be creative. I had a bit of personal space earlier on. Guess what I found as I was muppetting about? I found my sonic screwdriver and I thought, I'm going to keep this because someone's going to mention doctor in there. So here we are. I'm not a doctor, I'm the doctor. Okay, so enjoying the sessions. Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down. Nikki, I'm going to hazard a guess. You're probably about the same age as me because I know exactly where that came from. Someone's mentioned about being re-triggered. The thing about triggers are, I don't think our triggers ever go away, and other therapists might disagree, and they're entitled to. There's a lot of better therapists out there than me, higher pay scale than me, and so on. I don't think they're meant to go away, and I'll tell you why. If we lost our triggers, if we didn't know what our triggers were, there would be nothing stopping it happening over and over again. What happens with our triggers is a trigger is, if you will, it's like an emotional memory. It's an external thing, first of all, and it's a sensory thing. It's a sight, a sound, touch, whatever. What that triggers, that thing that happens triggers what's known as, it's an emotional memory. We remember things through association. So it brings up an emotional memory. That emotional memory, depending on the strength of it or how difficult the trauma was or the situation was, it has, as I said a moment ago, it leads us to believe yesterday's threat is present today. Now, when we understand our triggers, this is not the same as them going away, but whenever we understand our triggers, they can inform us. It looks the same, it feels the same, but it's not quite the same. Instead of us leaping to 100, going straight into survival mode, let's imagine it's something really, really deeply traumatic. Instead of leaping straight to 100, which is survival mode, we might go to a 10 or a 20, which informs us, nothing else. It informs us, it reminds us, but we recognize yesterday's threat was yesterday. Yesterday's situation was yesterday. I'm a different, same person, but I'm older, I'm wiser, I'm a bit stronger, I'm a bit more resilient. I'm in a different environment, I have a different support network. We recognize all of those things. And when it informs us, again, we can choose the course of action. Because what we're going to do, well, let me put it to you this way. It's like somebody who's been on a battlefield. You imagine a door slams and you see them jump and they're really cautious. They're looking all over the place for where the explosion is. When they've updated the memory, when they're allowing their triggers to inform them and so on, the next time the door slams, they'll jump. But they'll recognize everybody else in the room jumped as well. It was an unexpected noise, nothing else. So they're not right back there. They're not right back on the battlefield. So when we learn to understand and manage our triggers, it's not that they go away, but they stop having the impact that they once had. The way of looking at triggers as well is not all triggers are difficult. Not all triggers are horrible. Not all triggers bring up distress. Sometimes we get triggered in ways that are incredibly exciting, very pleasurable. You hear a song on the radio. Maybe you haven't heard that song since you were at school. And the moment you hear that song, you remember maybe someone you hung about with, your best friend at the time, or you might remember someone that you fancied, you had a crush on at the time, and you might have a little wry smile, and that's it. So there's a trigger there as well, but it's not necessarily an unpleasant one. It informs us, nothing else. It just reminds us. Okay. Emotional thinking versus logical thinking. Yeah. It's just, I think it's about getting them both to work together. If it's like you see a big tiger, as soon as you see the tiger, you think run. That thing gets its paws on you. This is not going to end well. Look at the size of the claws. Look at the size of the teeth. The reaction is run. That's instinctive. Now, back in the days when tigers ran about the streets, if there were streets back then, back in the days when tigers ran about the streets, that kept us alive. Okay, that kept us in one piece. We had to be cautious for dangers like that. Now, we look at the tiger, we think run. As I say, that kept us alive. But we're now in the 21st century. You look at the tiger, you say run. That's your emotive, that's your instinctive side. But then the logical, rational, problem solving, cognitive side of you says, slow down. It's on the television. You're perfectly safe. It can't jump out of the TV. So it's just getting the two to work together. We recognize, yes, it does bring something up in us, but the other part of us, if you will, can assess the danger. We recognize, yeah, that tiger looks scary, but we also know we're perfectly safe. It's on a television screen. Tigers roaming the streets, narcissistic ones. Okay, fair enough. Sounds kind of carnivorous, I suppose. Yeah. So I know we're coming towards the end of the time. I spend that much time waffling that I tend to go over time. I've done it again. I do appreciate everyone that's been watching tonight. I hope, as always, there's been something useful for you about awareness or building on our self-awareness. And I'm just realizing that over the past few live streams, there's maybe been a recurring theme, such as building resilience, such as the drama triangle, such as integrating our shadow self. It seems to be the recurring theme has been about self-awareness, how we learn about these things, how we integrate them, and how we can use them, how we can utilize them to our advantage, how we can make more informed decisions. So I guess there's just maybe something going on there. As yet, I hope you find something helpful. Again, building on self-awareness, it is something. There are books out there. There's as I say, there's exercises I'm sure you can find online. There's YouTube channels and so on. There's mindfulness stuff out there if anybody wants to practice it. That would be interesting. I mean, even following this, anybody finds anything useful at some point in the future, if you leave a comment, anything that you find helpful in your journey of discovery. And as I said, if there's anything you find helpful, if you feel comfortable, share it, because other people, I really do mean this, other people can benefit from your wisdom and your experience. They can learn from what works and what doesn't work. Again, so it's going to be another 10 days. So the next one's going to be on a Wednesday, which is not going to be this Wednesday. It's going to be the following Wednesday. Again, I will leave it open, but I will put out a suggestion if people want me to go with that. That's what I'll do. But I am kind of open to suggestions. Until the next time, everybody, take care, look after yourselves, and I'll see you soon.